Welcome to Transforming Medical Communications, a podcast by MedComms Experts. We share medical communications insights and advice from the best and brightest in the industry to find out what they're doing to push our industry forward. Here's your host, Wesley Portegies.
Welcome to Transforming Medical Communications. I'm your host, Wesley Portegies, and today I'm so excited to host Andrea Lacasia, who is a Senior Director at Ultragenics and works on the forefront of global medical affairs and scientific communications in the rare disease space. In this episode, we're going to discuss the intricate balance between innovation and compliance that I'm sure everyone is struggling with at one or the other moment. And also, we're going to talk about some innovative engagement strategies. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Maybe to get us started, it would be great to hear a little bit from you about how you actually ended up in medical communications and what makes you so passionate about it.
Sure. So after receiving my PharmD, I actually worked in the inpatient pharmacy in a hospital, rounding with physicians, enjoyed that. Then I bridged out to ambulatory care, worked in the anticoagulation clinic and in an outpatient hospital pharmacy. And after about 3 years there, I was recruited to work in biotech and pharmaceutical industry. Never thought I would be there, but decided to change things up and try it out and ended up loving it and stayed in medical communications pretty much almost the last 20 years now. And yeah, I really enjoy the mission of MedCom, which to me, how it speaks to me is that I really like interacting with patients and physicians, helping them understand the medical data so that this information can empower them. They can advocate really well for themselves or for their patients. I also do speak multiple languages, so communication is a bit of a passion of mine to know other languages. And I'm doing this work on a global scale, so it's super fun and impactful.
Amazing. What other languages do you speak?
I speak German and French.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I lived in Switzerland for some time, so I speak a little bit of German.
Oh, nice. Very
I'll
nice.
try it today. Yeah, and it's great that you have like a clinical background as well. So that means you can really understand when you're creating your communication strategies and tactics, how this will likely land in the real life setting where it actually really happens.
Right. Exactly.
So maybe a question to start with is around working in the rare disease space. And my question to you is like, could you help our listeners understand how you feel the differences between medical communications in other spaces than the rare disease space?
Yeah. So for the longest time, I actually was specializing in oncology. And over the 5 or 6 years, I've been in rare disease. And there are some distinct differences. Oftentimes, with the rare diseases that companies are pursuing treatments for, there's very little epidemiological data, disease course data, mortality data, and overall outcomes data with the current standard of care. So you're starting with a baseline of very little knowledge, and it takes time to get that understanding of truly what is happening for people with this disease. So once you have that information, then you can really dive into what are the challenges that patients are facing and their caregivers. So it really is a very different field than where I had been before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how would this translate in like the daily reality of medical communications?
So what we've found and what I realized pretty soon into my role when I started with a rare disease company is that the patients themselves do not have very much material, nor do the physicians that treat them. There's just not a lot of material that has been made available to them on the disease itself. For example, that a family could share with the teachers that their child goes to school with, caregivers, nannies, anybody in the community of that patient that needs to be aware of this rare disease. They really didn't have very much. And like the patients, the physicians really didn't have much to provide their patients with to help them navigate life overall and know what to expect with the diseases that they have. So that's where some ideas started coming about of what we could do.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll circle back to this topic later in the conversation here. But before we do, I was also thinking about a topic that I know we've been talking about before. And this is, I guess in this particular setting, is even more important to have like some kind of integrated approach to how we communicate and the different functions talking to each other, because you need to maximize your opportunity to communicate effectively even better.
Yeah.
So how does this look like in your organization currently? Are there different functions that perhaps work closely with each other and align on their communications better than what we have seen traditionally in pharma?
Yeah, I would say what I noticed once I joined a rare disease company like Ultragenics is that there are far more different functions that I have partnerships with than in a traditional pharmaceutical company in oncology, for example. So I feel that we partner very strongly with the molecular diagnostics team. We also partner obviously with field medical, but the field medical team can be a little bit different in a rare disease company. We have, of course, the traditional medical science liaisons, but we also have a fair amount of patient related liaisons that are assisting patients with different areas like engagement or access or even identifying a patient with a rare disease. So our team in medical information and communications, we have to have very strong partnerships with all the field medical teams, as well as some of the more specific functions in global medical affairs, like I said, like molecular diagnostics and health economics outcomes research also.
Yeah. So how have you seen impacting your medical communications tactics? Like, let's say you organize a satellite symposium or something like that. How have you seen that this really helped shaping your content and your educational messaging?
So we do get quite a bit of feedback from these different field medical teams and different med affairs functions. And that feeds into a very large global medical affairs Q&A that my MedCom team builds. And so we have to create this Q&A so that it actually works for multiple teams. It's not just there for the MSLs or MedInfo, it's for a much broader medical affairs team with various specific functions. So we might have questions on the data, which is obvious, but we might have a whole section on diagnostics. We might have a whole section on real world data, so that we have to craft the Q&A so that it works for all these different groups at the company in medical affairs and on a global scale. So we're also covering the whole globe. And there might be key differences in even like the standard of care or the epidemiology from one region to the other. So we really need to incorporate the lens from each region also into those Q&As.
Interesting. How do you go about that?
Yeah, it's a hard task. You have a lot more literature you need to go through, a lot more feedback from the different regions, a lot more sharing of content that needs to be incorporated into the Q&A. So it takes a longer time, but then it's a very robust Q&A that can be used globally by anybody in medical affairs at the company.
Great. Yeah. As an industry, we're trying to innovate and think about how we can communicate more effectively to our stakeholders. And I guess everyone is familiar with some of the hurdles that we need to overcome doing that, like in regards to compliance. So could you tell us a little bit more about maybe some innovative communication projects that you have been working on and where compliance was perhaps an issue, or how you overcame those boundaries, anything of that nature?
So we had identified in the beginning that patients and their physicians really didn't have a lot of even disease state information on some of these rare diseases. And so we knew of a third party vendor that creates nice, small, concise, rare disease education booklets. And I had done this at a prior company. And we had created one for healthcare providers and one for patients. And it was written and published by a third party vendor with key opinion leaders or experts on that disease. One in lay language for patients, one in key scientific language for HCPs. These are short booklets, but they really highlight everything about the disease. And we decided to approach legal and compliance about the possibility of creating such booklets. And we had several meetings with them. We provided detailed information about it, the guardrails that we knew we had to set, the unbiased authorship, how it would be reviewed, the intended audience. And so legal and compliance was very much involved in the decision around how we could go forward with this and the contract describing in detail how this should be done and over the time and how minimal the input would be from the actual company. So when the purpose is really objective to educate the scientific or patient community about a rare disease that is not widely understood, and we find external experts and we're executing in that line of thought, we were able to get the support by legal and compliance to go forward with this project. And I'll just put in there that we've had very strong feedback, positive feedback on these booklets. And in a prior company to Ultragenics, we had created one, and just want to put a shout out there that the British Medical Journal actually gave us a commendation for one of the booklets that we had created. So it was really great to see the impact and that it was very useful.
Yeah, what I specifically like from what you're saying is that it seems like a collaboration between you and compliance to see how you can do something. In all honesty, sometimes these conversations are a little bit like butting heads, right? It's like
Right.
one party wants one thing and then compliance doesn't want it. And sometimes it feels a little bit like the feel of like how to accomplish something together is lacking a little bit. So what I wanted to ask you is, what do you think are the factors that put you on the same side of the table or the counter with compliance? And how can our colleagues maybe nurture or foster a situation where they can achieve like this kind of collaboration for the greater good rather than a battle?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've always enjoyed a very close relationship to legal and compliance for this very reason. And I think it's a really important relationship to have and to be able to be very transparent and collaborative with them on your function in medical communications and what the needs are of the patients and the physicians that you're getting questions from and you're getting feedback. You're the sort of external pulse of what's going on in the world for this disease. And the more that you can be transparent and share that information with them, the more they're going to understand what your innovation push is about and why you would like to provide more medical and scientific information to this community. So I feel like they tend to then really understand what the needs are and understand that as a company looking for treatments in rare disease, that really is part of our role, is to help the awareness of the disease and help patients navigate it. So let's try and find a way that we can do that compliantly. I would say don't hesitate to speak with them, have meetings with them. Some people do hesitate to reach out to legal and compliance and assume the answer will be no. And I just wouldn't assume that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think the key point that I heard from what you're saying is don't push on like what you want to do, but maybe focus more on why you actually want to do it.
Exactly.
What are we trying to achieve? What are the objectives? Clients understands those objectives better. You maybe empower them to also think more with you instead of just looking at what you want to do and pointing out all the things that potentially would be a problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. They really are our thought partners and providing great suggestions once they know what the needs are and they know the guardrails better than I do. And then we can come together on an idea that might actually work. So it comes together nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and talking about like more innovative approaches, and this was a beautiful example, I think, of an approach where innovation can sometimes be simple or not digital, right?
Mhm.
Like, and those are often the most powerful ideas. But if we look at the digital space, like, have you recently maybe done any cool new things that we should hear about?
Yeah, we did work again, obviously with legal and compliance, but also our clinical counterparts across the organization to come up with a rare disease mechanism of disease video combined with some investigational product mechanism of action video in it. So it was a combination of the disease and how this investigational product potentially works. And we ended up creating it in lay language for patients and for HCPs to review with their patients for clinical trial enrollment specifically. And This was a very new approach to clinical trial enrollment that had come about, and it was felt that a video could really help those PIs help patients understand the disease and what drug is in this actual trial investigationally. And it was a short video, maybe 3 minutes long. We had it in lay language, very simple. And we actually had a metaphor to the mechanism of action that really helps people understand the mechanism of action of this investigational product. And overall, it really helped enroll these key trials. And so, again, this was a great partnership between legal and compliance and clinical that was done beforehand to make sure that this video could actually work out. And it's greatly succeeded, which we're very excited about.
That sounds amazing. And you're almost answering my next question, because my next question was about metrics. It's like, did you happen to set any metrics for this particular tool? And how is it going?
That's a great question. So we ended up translating this video into 8 languages so it can be used worldwide. And it was shared with some of the principal investigators and approved by them, et cetera, to be used. I haven't gotten specific metrics on how many times it was utilized. That would be great. We have not been able to get that data yet, but we would like to. The only data that I currently can track is when in medical communications, we get an unsolicited request for content on this rare disease and the investigational product, then I am allowed to share this video reactively. And so I have metrics on that. And it's been utilized quite a bit, even through the MedInfo call center, but I don't have the totality yet,
Yeah.
which would be nice. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really cool concept. And also, I know in the rare disease space, it's harder to find your patients to enroll, right? So putting an extra effort into that part in the enrollment materials is definitely a good thing.
Yeah. And the language, leveraging different languages was huge. I didn't realize that at first. I thought, oh, we'll just create it in English. But it has had even more impact because we were able to create it in different languages for those key sites.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking a little bit about metrics already. Like, what is your view in general in MedComms on metrics? And how would you say can we improve our understanding of impact of what we do and show value of all these activities and investments in medical communication?
Yeah, it's hard. We have our standard metrics, and we hope that people read our reports and can deduce the impact based on the numbers that we're giving them. However, I do think we could be more creative and possibly find a way to showcase certain real-time stories or real-time cases of success where whether it was a patient that was able to join a clinical trial because of the video or some other MedCom content they were able to leverage, and then what the ongoing patient story was. A lot of detail and we'd need to really dive in, but I think highlighting certain patient cases and patient stories would be phenomenal. And we could try something even more simple, like a physician unsolicited request came in on how to calculate the correct dose for a patient, and then following up what the course was, et cetera. But obviously there's going to be compliance and legal guardrails there too, and patient privacy. So we'd have to figure those aspects out. But I think people want more narrative and more impactful stories that they can really understand how medical communications content really does impact a patient. Still thinking about that one. Yeah,
Well, keep me posted.
I will. I will.
I'm joking, of course. Everyone is trying to figure this out. And I do think the digital space allows us way more opportunity to track metrics and impact and more meaningful metrics. We like the benchmarks. So it's really hard to know, like, whatever the number is, if it's a good number or not so good number. But we're all working towards it. So I'm sure it's going to appear.
Yeah.
Now, I know you're also in charge of medical information, if I'm correct, right?
Yep.
And I heard you say before about this really cool animation that you could use it reactively when you get a MedInfo request. And it made me think about MedInfo in general, because like so far, my observation for the last 15 years or so has been that we have the scientific response documents or scientific response letters, which typically are super text heavy, and the answer that needs to be answered is often somewhere in the document, but not so convenient to find. How is that in your organization? Or like, since you were saying that you're integrating this animation into your MedInfo responses, I was wondering if there's anything else around MedInfo where you are leveraging different formats or better content or more innovative content.
I agree with what you said, that the text heavy Word document is okay and it does the job. However, having different formats to convey or show the information, show the data is welcomed by physicians and by patients. So having a video format as a response, we've noticed people get really excited about. We did try a video response on a different product that's actually marketed and going over just the side effects and the safety profile of it. And we actually interviewed our CMO at the time to discuss in lay language what those side effects are. And we were really excited to have this. However, we didn't get that many questions, unfortunately, on that particular topic. But we thought it was a cool, different approach, maybe a little more personable for patients to receive. So we might do that again, but on a different topic that's more frequently asked so that we get more utility. But we have incorporated links to other videos in our standard response letters, especially if it's a mechanism of action video and the SRL is about that, or mechanism of disease video. So people do like those different formats, and I would love to do more of that. That does take more time and budget, but I think people are interested in a different format like that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if I may ask, like, where do those videos typically live? Would that be on your, like, do you have like a MedInfo website or?
You can only get it as part of an unsolicited request at the moment. So it's all on an internal SharePoint. It's not publicly available where you could go and find it at the moment. Yeah, no, we haven't delved into how to do that compliantly. So,
But I think you said like that when you see one of these videos, there's links to other similar videos. Do you mean internally or?
yeah, so in the standard response letter, there could be an approved MOA video embedded in the standard response letter that has been approved for reactive unsolicited request use, basically. So it's packaged together.
Okay, yeah. But it doesn't link out to other videos.
No,
Okay.
not at this time. No.
But it's cool. Like I haven't seen it often, but what I did see, because I told you, well, last 15 years, I haven't seen much change. But actually the last 2 years, I've had like a lot of responses to our agency, to MedComms Experts, from MedInfo people that said like, hey, listen, I think we need to jump on the bandwagon here and make more like innovative and creative and short form content where we can. And whether this is from including animations and infographics and better visuals to actually thinking about like how the information is presented, like for instance, answering the most commonly asked questions first at the beginning of the document or something. There can be pretty small changes that are actually quite powerful.
I agree. Yeah. Back in the day, maybe 10 years ago, it was all about, oh, let's put color in the standard response letter and more graphics. And that's all great. But now we need to move on to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
For sure. And make it even more interesting and more digestible.
I see what you mean, but at the same time, I also am a big believer that design is such an important element of how you can make materials more educational.
Agree.
There's this concept, I think they call it heuristic scanning. The theory is that no one really reads right away. You look at a document and then there's like a few things you're going to check subconsciously before you really start reading. So first people scan and it takes about like a few seconds. And they scan for, if I remember it correctly, it's like, am I in the right place? Is this the information I need from the place it needs to come from? And if the answer is yes, then it will actually transition from scanning into reading. And design has a huge impact on how you can help people making that transition to understand that, yes, this is the information you need from the source that you need it from, and it's worth to now start actually reading.
Yeah. Does it capture your attention? Does it appeal to you? These are other things that we haven't always thought about.
Yeah, and especially with online content consumption. And let's say that there's so much content out there that is just like at maximum a few seconds. If you look at like Instagram, YouTube Shorts or something like that, people are scrolling through that, not necessarily in medical communications, but just in life. And we're all people. So we're going to apply that to our professional lives too. So now our brains are trained to, in a split second, if something is something we're going to actually engage with or not.
Absolutely.
And that huge impact on how effective your content is ultimately going to be.
Just to digress a little bit, I used to also head up medical education, and we tried different formats there too, especially like a mobile app for people to learn about a disease, et cetera. And it was a huge hit because people are more and more doing their work on their phones. They're not always tied to a personal computer or a laptop. They're on the go and they can learn on the go. So I think maybe looking even at apps and app-based learning and app-based content doesn't sound so novel and new, but people definitely are more on their phones than anything.
Yeah, it's true. And I think we need to walk before we run. And without wanting to be too negative about it, I think we're quite far behind in the industry on how we communicate compared with many other industries. So
Yes,
kind of time to pick up. And those kind of relatively simple things have a huge impact. So yeah, no, I think that's a great observation. So what other technologies do you feel like is going to shape our industry further over the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, so I've been hearing from other colleagues that head up medical communications or information at other biotech pharma companies. Some have actually already incorporated AI to assist them in medical writing of their standard response letters, or even in creating graphics for their standard response letters. So that's very intriguing to hear. And it's also shifting the work speed for some of these departments. And so they're able to create content quicker. And I find that could be very interesting for us because we have a huge portfolio. Any company with a huge pipeline and a huge portfolio, it's hard to keep up with everything that needs to be done. So AI could definitely be an interesting assistance for that. We have not explored it yet, but like I said, other companies definitely have, and they're benefiting from it in MedCom itself.
Yeah, well, I've heard the same among MedInfo specifically, also publications, summary senders. Well, it's exciting. We're heading towards the end of our episode here today. So reflecting on our conversation, if there would be one thing that you could share with our colleagues listening to this episode today, what would it be?
I guess my little mantra that I think of is don't let former ways dictate how you do things now, and really push for new helpful communication formats to maximize the understanding of what you're trying to convey to your audiences. Push for modernization and innovation in medical communications, because I think your audience and the recipients will be appreciating it so much more. So I think we have a duty to keep pushing that innovation further and further, and working obviously with legal and compliance to make it work. And I think it can be done.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I'm a big proponent of that too. It's why I started an agency 11 years ago. I was on the client side and I was feeling they were giving up trying to do things in a new way. And then I was like, well, if you don't do it, then
I'm going to do it.
So
That's
thank you
great.
so much, Andrea. It was so fantastic to have you on the show here today. Thank you for sharing all your insights, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Transforming Medical Communications is brought to you by MedComms Experts. To find out more about MedComms Experts and how we create some of the most cutting-edge medical communications programs anywhere in the world, visit www.medcoms-experts.com. And then make sure to search for Transforming Medical Communications in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at MedComms Experts, thanks for listening.